I had been promising to build a gym in the garden for years. One of those things that I kept saying, I'll get around to it eventually. The kids were studying sport to level 3 and they were playing rugby and hockey at a decent level, and we were all paddling regularly, so it made sense to have our own gym to meet our needs, and we had the space for it. Actually, I don't think Claire thought I was ever going to do it. I do a lot of things, but I plan to do an awful lot more. When I was told that I was going to need brain surgery, I thought, if I don't get this done now, I might never be able to do it. And that's the sort of deadline motivation that I need to get a project done. To be honest, there was more to it than that. I chose the gym, but this could have been any substantial project. I needed something to work on, something to focus on. I needed something physical, grounded, because everything else felt uncertain. The gym represented more than just a building project. Whenever you're talking about neurosurgery, people usually think that the most scariest part is the operation itself. You know, somebody digging around inside your head. But really it isn't. A craniotomy isn't like getting your appendix out, which is serious enough. But even just the act of opening up the skull upsets the brain's equilibrium. Actually, I would have loved for my surgery to be one of the ones where you're awake during the operation, but mine wasn't. There are so many important functions packed into a tiny space, and the operation is never routine. And although the surgeon knows more or less what the side effects might be, just depending on what part of the brain he's hacking out, he can't be absolutely sure until months afterwards what the long-term effects are going to be. Lots of people do have brain surgery and fairly quickly get back to life as normal, but just be aware, it is a big deal every single time. The problem probably isn't whether the operation itself was successful, it's how it affects you afterwards. Now, the area of my brain that they were going to work on carried a decent risk of potential side effects and risks, seizures, weakness in my arms and legs, confusion, memory problems, severe headaches, balance issues, and speech problems were all issues that could affect me. Some of those changes would be temporary because, well, like any injury, your brain recovers. But some of them would be permanent. And like I said, it can be months before they even know which is which. And when it's your brain, I mean, those risks, they don't feel abstract. They're very personal. You start wondering things like, will I think the same way afterwards? Will I be able to speak the same way? Will I still feel like me? My oncologist was very clear about one thing. Nobody was taking neurosurgery lightly. In fact, she told Claire and me that they wouldn't be recommending it unless they were sure it was cancer and unless my life was genuinely at risk. This wasn't a precaution, it wasn't optional, And it wasn't something that you could just wait a bit longer to see if the size of the growth goes down. We had moved beyond that. Now, I've been through excisions and other surgeries to remove cancer before. I'd had targeted cancer therapy, I'd had immunotherapy, I had had radiosurgery, and sometimes I just thought that I could keep pushing back again and again. But neurosurgery is kind of next level. There were a few times before when I had thought, well, this is it, I'm about to die. But there was something this time that, despite knowing how precarious the neurosurgery was and the fact that I needed it, I still thought I was going to be okay. It was one of those times when I was probably more fascinated than frightened. Although I didn't know exactly when the surgery was going to be, I realised quite quickly that they weren't messing about, and I wasn't going to be able to get this garden gym completed on time. I decided that the first stage would be to get the walls and the roof up, to make it good enough to keep the rain off. That way, I could store my tools ready to finish the gym when I got back from the hospital. Now, of course, I was worried. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to continue afterwards. But if you're always worrying about what might go wrong or why you might fail to finish something, you are never going to start anything. Also, I wanted future me, post-surgery me, to finish the gym and be able to use it. I needed my future self to be able to lift those sheets of plywood and lift weights and measure and slot stuff into place and screw things together. Now, I'm not talking about any sort of manifestation nonsense. I'm talking about a realistic future goals that I intended to achieve. But as the surgery dates got close, I was running out of time. Now don't tell my manager at work, but I even took a couple of days off. Not because I was about to have brain surgery, just to work on the gym. And as the deadline loomed, I even managed to persuade the rest of my family to help out. I was told to present myself at the neuro ward at the Royal anytime on Saturday the 19th of November in preparation for surgery on the Monday. They didn't try to hide the fact that bringing me in 2 days before wasn't for any medical reason. It was simply because if I arrived on the day of the surgery, they couldn't guarantee that there would be a bed. It's a ridiculous, inefficient strategy because emergency neurology, yes, it's unpredictable, but also because the system is broken. Any time on Saturday sounds flexible, but when you know what's coming next, it really isn't. I could potentially have a hard stop rather than a new start. With so many unknowns, how the surgery would go, what recovery would look like, what I would be capable of afterwards, I didn't want to go into the hospital before I got the roof on the gym. And those two things kind of became intertwined into my planned timetable. Complete stage 1 of the gym, then take a short break in the hospital, to do some stuff, before I could then get on to work at stage 2. The gym's blueprints were entirely in my head. There was just a few squiggly lines and numbers on a whiteboard, and nobody but me would ever be able to understand them. I know it's silly, but I did that kind of deliberately. I wanted to need my brain to work afterwards. So I kept building, right up until the very last minute. I worked on it all day Saturday. When they said any time on Saturday, I took them literally. I took them at their word. It was 10 p.m. when I stood in the dark, deserted corridor and knocked on the door of the neuro ward with my overnight bag in my hand.